walk us through the laws here. What is the basic law that obtains? And then, of course, we have a situation of a German-owned aircraft that went down on French territory carrying passengers from many countries, including Spain, Germany, and even the United States. Who sues where if they do sue?
Now, those are very good questions. The first thing that everyone has to understand that this is an international flight. So international law, called the Montreal Convention, actually governs the liability of the airline. And the Montreal Convention actually gives the airline some protections, but it also gives the family some rights. One of the things that the Montreal Convention says is the airline is liable, strictly liable, for a certain level of damages, and that comes out to about $160,000. Each family has to prove what their damages are, but if a family has $5 million worth of damages and the airline proves that it's not at fault, then the airline only has to pay about $160,000 to the family.
Does a plaintiff in a case like this have to prove that the airline was somehow guilty of negligence, or does is the onus on the airline to prove that it was not?
The families only have to prove that an accident occurred. And while you might say, well, this is a mass murder, it's not really an accident, the Supreme Court here in the United States has basically interpreted what an accident is to include an event like this. The onus is really on the airline if it wants to try to enforce the limit of liability, which is in the Montreal Convention. The airline has to come in and say, we're not negligent, we're victims too, we're not at fault.
What do you think will happen here? And is there any precedent from the Allianz is apparently the lead underwriter here, be reinsure the claim. Is there any precedent in the Air Egypt crash where a pilot dove the plane into the ocean?
Well, Egypt Air was liable under the law. They did compensate, ultimately compensated the families fully. They tried initially, I think, to enforce what the liability regime, the defense that they had at that time, but ultimately they basically gave up the fight. Here, just remember, this is all insured. I think the best thing for Lufthansa, the best thing for German wings is to compensate the families. And the one thing that they have to look out for in Europe, especially in France, is this idea of corporate criminal liability, which as a plaintiff's lawyer, I'm not a big fan of. I don't think there are many big fans of this, but it's a thing that happens in Europe. I just think it would be unfair in this circumstance to try to prosecute the airline for this terrible act.